Hello and welcome back to the Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, Alex, and with me I have Brad. How are you, Brad?
Good, thanks, mate.
Yeah, it's good to be back. I guess I had you on last week when we were doing our flashback episode looking back at the 2014-15 season, but it's good to be talking City again with a game coming up this weekend. Are you excited for the action to be back?
I am, mate. I probably didn't quite get used to having such late nights when the World Cup was on, but now for being on the west side of Australia, the times it's not too bad for City games.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about the Watford game towards the end of the episode, but 2 a.m. Sunday morning, Sunday evening, I should say, Monday morning is a reasonably unique time slot, I guess, with no Premier League action on. They've spread the Championship fixture out, but it's gonna be a bit of a battle here on the East Coast. But at least we had a good time for the Socceroos game against Argentina, which was a much more challenging time for yourself.
Yeah, it always sort of amazes me how you decide at the last minute whether you're actually getting up for these games or not. But I haven't regretted it yet, and this year I think I've only had one City game that I've decided to go to bed and not stay up for, and I think we got belted. So at the moment, my judgment's not too bad. So fingers crossed this week City do the right thing for us.
Yeah, and not to get too sidetracked, but it would be good. The more games that we have on KO or BN Sports, really, the better, because it does mean that if we do end up kind of phoning it in and going to sleep, you can actually get up in the morning and watch the replay straight away. It'd be nice if iFollow had the same feature, but suspect that's a little way off. But look, we'll get into it. We've got that Reading fixture just before the break to cover. We'll just do a quick recap of that because it is a couple of weeks ago now. We just didn't do an episode after that game at the time. Pretty disappointing way to lose the game, I thought. Last minute of the game, really kind of unfortunate own goal off Longman. Had looked reasonably sharp during the game. Probably should have been 2-0 up when Slater kind of fluffed a chance at an open goal. But just a really disappointing way to go into the break, I guess.
Look, it was, and I think anytime you concede an own goal, you're not happy. But the fact that it was so late as well was a real sort of dagger to the heart, if you like. And I mean, most of us would have said that playing against Reading, a point would be not a bad result, if you like, in the scheme of how things have been going. So to cop that so late as well, I mean, I don't even know. We were past 90 minutes, weren't we?
Yeah, I think it was like 92nd, 93rd minute. Yeah.
So you're just sort of thinking, what into the build up to that situation could we have done differently? But look, the point at the moment, I suppose, is that was coming up to a month ago. So
yeah,
we could just put
draw a
it
line
behind
under it.
us and move
Absolutely.
on and start a new season. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Look, I guess the last thing on it though, a nice positive that Greaves got. He scored a scrappy goal a couple of games previously, but to get a really well worked set piece goal in this game, hopefully is a sign that he'll manage to get a few more over the coming weeks.
Yeah, probably the thing that has impressed me, I suppose, although we know what he's like, the way he moves up the pitch for his size, he's got good pace, but also the fact that he is getting on the goal sheet, obviously a bit more rapid in the last few games. But it's just good to see because really we see him as our best or one of our best defenders. But if he's chiming in with goals, it's going to go a long way to help us if the rest of the squad are up and about for the second half of the season.
Yeah, no doubt. Cool. Okay, well, I'll give my votes for this game, and then if you've got votes as well, we can do those as well. I gave the 3 votes to Baxter, which I suppose is a little bit surprising in a 2-1 defeat, but I thought he made a couple of really smart saves. There was a Hoylett shot just before their first goal, which he palmed away really well. I think they had another decent chance later in the game, which he reacted to quite well as well. So I think he's starting to come back into a bit of form that we saw last season, which is obviously great to see. I gave Greaves the 2 votes. I thought it was a really well worked goal, and as you say, I think his general play around the pitch, the way he can carry the ball up the field. He's playing more at left back at the moment, which is surprisingly working out for him quite well. It's sort of like, we played Maguire at right back at one stage, I think, years ago, and it was not not quite as successful. But Greaves, as that sort of more mobile big man, is actually working out quite well at left back, I find. And then the one vote I just gave to Seri, who I thought had a pretty strong game, as he's tended to do in recent games.
Yeah, look, I think probably I'd give 3 to Greaves just because he scored. And like you said, I mean, the fact that he definitely played at left back in the previous games, and we've played with that back 3, he's played on that left side. But I don't know, maybe I'm just isolating him too much lately, but I feel almost like we've got a 6-foot+ wing back who can play in the centre. Like, that's what he feels like.
Yeah.
The way he really moves up that pitch. I mean, I'd love to see his mileage on the GPS since he's been playing on that left-hand side, because even the previous game you mentioned when he scored, it was a bit scrappy, but in the build-up to that, we could have scored 2 the way he passed balls in, and he's actually fizzing balls in with a good bit of pace. So maybe I'm just giving him 3 votes because of the last few games, but I didn't really have a 3-2-1, but I was just happy that Greaves scored and played well. And I actually think Baxter was worthy of a vote or 2, because I think that in a game that could have been a bit different, a bit earlier, he sort of gave us that little patch there in the second half when we sort of drifted away a bit. He made a couple of great saves, and I think probably almost sort of defensively commanded that back 4 to be a bit tighter, because we definitely started that game so well and we looked $1 million for half an hour.
Yeah.
But yeah, I almost think in the second half, if Baxter and probably Greaves don't play as well as they do, then we're not conceding in the 90th minute. We're conceding multiple times in the second half.
Yeah, no doubt. And on Greaves as well. I mean, he's playing 90 minutes almost every game. So the fact he's doing that from a fullback position now, so the kilometres, as you say, that he's clocking up now, is probably even more impressive from him.
Yeah, I think so too. And the thing I like is he can pass the ball. And
yeah,
I think probably in the past he's mainly been a bit too defensive minded. Obviously, he's a defender, he has to be. But the way he's played the ball up the park, we're actually almost getting that wing back type structure from him, but he is still playing that defender's role. So, yeah, been pretty impressed with him, to be honest.
Absolutely. Okay, well, we'll move on then, and I guess have a bit of a roundup of the news and events over the break that we've had. Obviously, the squad flew over to Turkey for a couple of I guess you'd call them pre-season games, mid-season games, both of which finished 1-1. Watched on by, I think it was 300 City supporters that Acun flew over to Turkey for that 10-day trip where, you know, they watched the England-Wales game, they went to the training sessions, they got a Q&A with Rosenia, all funded by the owner, supplied with copious amounts of Efes beer as one of our sponsors as well, which is, you know, it's pretty unique. I think Ryan Woods gave an interview after the trip just to say that, you know, that connection between the owner and the fans is such a unique one in a way that we have now, that we're sort of developing with this sort of trip and sort of the affinity that the fans really have for Acun and everyone involved with the club at the moment.
Well, yeah, mate, and I think probably I remember when he first took over, he said he was going to do things a bit differently, and he certainly lived up to that so far. I mean, first of all, his relationship with the previous manager, I thought, was one of those situations where he won't break it, but of course he is results focused, and that's that. And obviously brings in a new manager and wasn't too upset about whether he upset anyone else along the way. So we were sort of impressed with that. But then taking fans on the road like that, it's pretty interesting. And I'm wondering if he wants to do some sort of Australasian tour and pick a few up on the way. But I do love the fact that he's clearly a guy that wants the fans to know that he's a fan too. And he, you know, bribery will get you a long way in some cases. But I think the fact that the squad's overseas, playing football, supporters are following, he's really thinking a bit outside the box, which, to be honest, is something we haven't had previously. And okay, the results might not be there on the pitch, but it's a pretty special thing to do, even if it is only for a few hundred fans.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, the interesting thing about this was when it was first announced, I met it with a little bit of skepticism, I think, because it sounded very ambitious to just say, oh, you know, we're going to take all these supporters over to Turkey. We're going to give them an all expenses paid holiday. It's going to be great. And it got delayed. And you sort of start to think, oh, is it just going to keep getting delayed and then get forgotten about? Because I think the Allams mentioned something about doing like a sports village around the stadium or something along those lines, or they'd suggested some big thing, and then it just, oh no, that's what it was. It was that friendly with the Egyptian club after they'd had, I think there was like a disaster in Egypt or something, and they said they were going to do this friendly with the Egyptian club to raise money for it or something, and it just sort of kept getting delayed and kept getting sort of not really talked about, and it just sort of went away and didn't actually happen. And that just reminded me of that a little bit, with like the owners sort of having this big sort of ambitious idea of doing something and then it not quite happening. So the fact that it's actually happened, and he's sort of a man of his word, and he's done it, and I think he has said that, you know, they'd look to do it again, which is great. And yeah, I was telling a few friends at the pub last night, and they said, yeah, you know, maybe they can all fly out to Australia and you can go along for that instead. So it would be nice if they came out to this side of the world at some stage. But look, as you say, I mean, you know, bribery does help a little bit. Like, you know, the results aren't there on the pitch, but I don't think there's any sort of bad blood or bad sentiment towards Arjun, because he is an owner who shows how much he cares about the supporters and what he can do for the club, which is really great to see.
And look, mate, I suppose it is good to see. And the key thing that at the moment we can only judge him on is he doing what he says?
Yeah.
And so far, I mean, I know there was talk when he took over, he thinks the club should be in the Premier League and those sorts of things. But we know at the time he was quoted as saying, look, we've just got to be a strong club. It doesn't matter too much what division we're in, although he'd like to be in the Premier League. He wants his fans to be, you know, filling the stadium and be really proud and a big family. That's what he keeps saying. And he's certainly doing the right thing. Even if it is only for a few hundred fans, he's showing a lot of us who are a long way away that he's definitely quite keen to get his influence and his flair into the club and try that family approach.
Yeah, and you know, when you think that there's all this talk as well, I think he did a Q&A in Turkey as well. There was talk, I think, from him about buying another club somewhere to be a feeder club for us, and wanting to redevelop the stadium and do all and put the training center near the stadium. And there's a lot of ambition, and I wonder if he necessarily has the funding to actually achieve a lot of that stuff. But it's great to see him expressing that ambition and expressing those sorts of ideas and vision for the club, where it could end up, and what it could actually eventuate in being under his ownership. It's quite exciting.
Absolutely, and I'm sure, as a joke, he probably hasn't met with the city council yet because they'd stop a few of his plans. But I think he's the sort of guy that probably sees a bit of the Man City model,
yeah,
and realises that we're not Man City, but we could certainly be, you know, a smaller version of
a budget
Man City.
version. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's ideally what he wants. He probably doesn't want to have a big club anyway. He probably wants that, you know, if we've got
the community feel, yeah,
that he's entrenched in too. That's the difference. And I know we'll talk about other things in a moment, but as an owner, he is entrenched and wants to be in the fan's face. He is a fan.
yeah. No doubt. Yeah, no, just quickly before we do move on to those other matters, on the field, a couple of injuries, or a couple of players still out injured. Baxter, I think, went back to Chelsea to get an injury treated. I think it was a knee or an ankle or something like that. So a little bit concerning to see if he's out for any decent amount of time with that. It did mean, though, that we saw Lo Tutala play a part in both of the friendlies. You know, from all reports, was quite impressive. Wasn't overly tested. I mean, they were just friendly games, but good to see him getting a few minutes in the senior team as well. And obviously we've got Ingram, who's a more than capable keeper to step in for Baxter. And then the other one, I guess a bit more of a concern, is I would have hoped to see Elia get a few minutes in his return from injury, because I think they said he'd be back after the World Cup. But maybe they literally mean after the World Cup and he won't be back for another couple of weeks. But hopefully he's not too far away.
Yeah, I think the good thing is, like you were saying, with the Lo Tutala, that most of us, we're a long way away here, of course, but most supporters of the club would be happy just to see these guys actually get some game time so we can see what they're really like. I mean, the story with Baxter, has there been anything in the last few days about what the injury actually is?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll have a look for it now, see if I can find something.
Yeah, it was more just the fact that I know he's obviously going back to his parent club for the treatment. We all understand that, but I haven't seen too much about what the actual injury is. And that was probably what I was more concerned about, that are we going to get a surprise where we find out that he's actually somewhat more injured than we first think?
Yeah, so apparently Rosenius said he's been playing with an injury. There's a bit of damage to the ligament in part of his ankle. We want to make sure that he's 100% right and for him to get the best possible treatment and care. So actually that sounds reasonably positive, because what that suggests to me is that it wasn't stopping him from playing, but because we've now got this break where he can go and get patched up and sort of get back to 100% fitness, they'll send him back to Chelsea where they can look after him as their player. Potentially it means that they're sort of paying for the treatment as well, which probably helps. But that the way that's sort of phrased, it does make me a little bit more reassured that it's not actually too serious. But I guess we'll see if he's in the lineup against Watford.
Yeah, that's going to be the key.
Okay, well, yeah. So on the topic of owners, of course, there was the very sad news just a few days ago that Asemalam had passed away, age of 82, I believe. I mean, we'd known for a while that he was quite unwell. There was a few stories over the last few years about his health battles, but of course, it's quite sad news to hear of his passing. Obviously, there's a lot of controversy around the Alums' ownership of the club over the last 10 years. But at this sort of time, I think it's really worth just remembering the really good times that he brought to the club and to the city as a whole. I mean, there's a lot of talk about the amount of money that he donated to medical facilities and infrastructure around the city, brought some of the best spells of football that City have seen in their history, 2 different spells in the Premier League under his ownership, an FA Cup final, a first European trip that we were just talking about last week on our flashback episode. There's a lot of good that he and his family have done for the city, and it's really sad news at this time.
Yeah, look, it is, and we all had our issues, let's say, with the Alums as owners in the end there. But I think part of that, to be fair to the older statesmen, let's say, is that certainly in the early days when Assam was clearly running the show, we obviously went through some great periods on the field, but also off the field. And I think, there's been a lot of conjecture over forums and different chats over the time that it was only when really Ehab took over that we saw the Alums become more of enemy number one than anything else. But I mean, as a man, he clearly obviously has done a lot for the community and those sorts of things, which, that doesn't happen too often, or it's a rare commodity these days. So it's sad, and like we'll talk about in a minute, he brought a lot of joy and hope to us. Well, it was on his reign, if you like, with a club that was staring down the barrel under the previous owners and regime, that he reunited the club somewhat.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were basically facing a winding up order, I believe, when they took ownership of the club back in 2010. Plowed a huge amount of money into the club, and some people will say that they basically managed to get that money back by the time they sold the club, which is entirely their right. And I think sometimes there's that line blurred between people just sort of expecting club owners to just write a blank check or write off a whole heap of losses over their ownership in order to be good owners, and that for an owner to make any money out of a club is somehow seen as a negative, when you look at the state the club was in by the time they sold to Ajun, and I think Ajun has even commented on the fact that the club was in such a strong financial position, and that was a huge part of why he was able to, or why he was attracted to buy the club. It's a huge credit to them that they did run the club in such a responsible manner, and there'll be arguments about whether they were ambitious enough or had the sort of that ambition to put money in and fund a huge squad, but you know, at the same time, you can say that they never put us in any sort of financial peril. And I think that's a huge credit to him and the way that he ran the club.
Yeah, and I think I remember there was talk, you know, when he first took over the club that he's a businessman. You know, he wasn't really a football man and these sorts of things. And being a local, he wanted to do things for the local community and those sorts of things. And to be fair, he did. You know, like you said, he took us off the canvas, lifted us up to pretty lofty heights. And let's face it, whether he's a businessman, a fan, or supporter, it was his money and his intervention that got us to those points. And he'll, you know, certainly from historical perspective, from where we got to, he'd go down as one of the best owners that we've had for that period.
Yeah.
So, yeah, rest in peace, old man, because he certainly gave us something to talk about.
Absolutely. Okay, well, let's move on then, and we'll play our game of Who Am I, and then we'll finish off with a preview of the Watford game, if you're good to go.
I'm good to go, but I'm actually nervous now.
Okay, so I'll give you your first clue. I made 293 appearances for City, scoring 8 goals.
Okay. No, that doesn't give me anything, mate. Sorry.
That's all right. I reckon actually you might be able to get it from this next clue. So we'll say, I joined City in 2003 and I left in 2013.
2003, did you say?
I did, yeah. So that would have been, I think that was League 2. 2013 was Brucey.
10 years. How many appearances did you say?
293.
Okay. All right.
And if not, you'll definitely get it on the next clue.
Okay.
Do you want the next one?
I think I'll have to, mate, yeah.
I played at left back and wore the number 3.
Oh, Andy Dawson.
I was like,
yeah,
they did get.
Actually.
Yeah, I thought you might have got it off the 10 years at the club, but yeah, I knew as soon as I said left back, it was gonna be a gimme. But yeah, well done. Yeah, no, Andy Dawson. I gave Dan Liam Rossania a couple of weeks ago, and he was similarly stumped. And I think he actually had to go all the way to hearing the initials before he realised who it was. So it was a bit of a funny one, but no, all good. Okay, well, we'll move on then. We'll talk Watford this coming Sunday night. Interesting element of this as well is, of course, that they have Ismail Assar, who I think played in the most recent Senegalese game against England. I'd have to double check that, but there's the potential then, of course, that he might not actually start for them against us this weekend. He's obviously, I'd probably say, their most dangerous player. You know, they're coming 4th in the table now. They've won 3 of their last 5, I believe. And I actually was surprised when I was looking up our history against them. We haven't played them since Marco Silva was in charge, and we won 2-0 where Kluka scored that absolute screamer of a volley after I think Nias got red carded. So it's been a fair while since we've actually faced Watford.
Wow, okay. Well, I mean, I always think of that great day when we played Watford away in the playoff semi and Barmby stuck one in, and we played in that sensational white away kit. That's my Watford memories. But I think probably the thing that I'm really happy to look at is now that Rossini's had this break, and they've obviously been away and they're working together on this next phase, if you like. I'm really interested to see what his footprint looks like now. He's had a few weeks to mould things a bit more his way. There was certainly some good signs against Reading that, oh yeah, well, I'm impressed with this, but that really only lasted 30, 40 minutes. And we know that, you know, previously Andy Dawson had talked about the fact that we were going wandering in the last 20 minutes of games. And we've got to sort of hold on for those whole 90 minutes to be able to actually grind some of these results out. So this one seems to be another one of those ones where, okay, you can look at Watford any which way you like as being a Premier League club or thereabouts. But to be honest now, we've got to basically just look at every fixture that we're angling for some points. And we know Watford's form hasn't been too bad. So we've just got to be able to say, well, based on what we think here, we've got to try and aim for a point.
Yeah, no doubt. So I just checked. So Sarr did start and he played the full 90 minutes against England. So there's every chance that that he won't be in the starting 11 for them on the weekend, which is a bit of a boost. But of course, for us, Oscar's still, I think he's serving the third match of his red card suspension, which is a bit of a shame. I guess it would probably mean that Longman's up top again. It'll be interesting. I sort of alluded to it before with Ali not getting minutes in the two friendly games. It'll be interesting to see what our 11 actually looks like and whether we've got any of our injured players back. But I'd almost assume it'd be pretty close to the 11 that we played, I guess, in that second friendly against Trabzonspor or even the Reading game. I can't imagine there's going to be a whole heap of changes from that side.
No, I wouldn't think so. And I mean, the Reading game was the first time, well, it felt like Rosinha had stamped his idea on that formation side of things. So we weren't playing anything other than what I think he thinks is our strongest formation, which is playing those four at the back. Be it the fact that, you know, the fullbacks have given a bit of license to obviously get up and back. But I think as well, the only thing that, like, it's funny that you mentioned about suspensions and so on. The only concern I've actually got playing Watford is on the attack side of things. I think, like you mentioned, if we're still leading lines with Longman, I can't see us scoring, say, those 2 goals that are going to get us 3 points. I think defensively we looked okay against Reading. We had a couple of moments where we probably got a bit scary, but I think that might have also been the formation with playing those 2 midfielders sort of a little deeper. But I think against Watford, the only thing I can think Rosinha is going to do, if he's not going to play that same formation, is because he's worried about something on the Watford side of things. That's all. Yeah.
And look, like you said, it'll be really interesting to see just how much he's been able to work with the squad, because I'm trying to think, Millwall was his first fixture and he was only in charge for a day or so before that game. And you could already see in that game the impact that he was having. So for him to have 2.5 weeks with the squad now, hopefully means that he's able to really get across his ideas, get that structure working. And we'll see almost a new city in the sense that the way we'll be playing, the way we'll be linking up will be quite different. And as you say, I mean, I agree. I mean, I still find it remarkable that we signed 16 players in the summer and we're only, 2 injuries leave us with basically Longman and Tyler Smith as our only real striker or attacking options. I mean, we've got Pelkas and Cynic and, that's probably the main options, isn't it? I mean, Salah's potentially one of those sorts of attacking players, but I think he's still out injured as well. So it'll certainly be interesting to see. I'd assume that we'd go the same 11. So you've got Pelkas and potentially Cynic would come in. I don't think he started against Reading, but it'll be an interesting one. You're sort of basically saying, like, look, if we can get a draw out of this, that's probably best case scenario?
Well, yeah, look, I think so, because I think the only thing I'm sort of considering here is the fact that, obviously from a goals perspective, to basically put it beyond doubt, we're going to have to score 2 or 3. And if you go back to the last time we did that, that would be the Cardiff game, which wasn't long ago. But that was really on the back of Slater's efforts. That wasn't anyone leading the line or, and you hate to say it, but obviously, Oscar is a proven goal scorer. We get that. But like you said, it's almost like we don't tend to have a backup for Oscar. I know we've got players, and don't get me wrong, we've got strikers, but we don't have an out and out, and it's funny enough that I was talking to someone not long ago who was talking about Will Keane and how he's still running around. And in the end, I'm not saying for a minute we'd have him back, but isn't it funny how basically he scored pretty much the same, if not more goals than Oscar this year?
Yeah, he's having a great season at Wigan. Yeah,
you're talking about a backup or someone leading the line. We know Will Keane could do it. He wasn't our popular choice, but he could do it. And he is doing it. So
Yeah.
I think that's still probably the thing that, and maybe Rafinha needs a January window to be able to get what he wants there. But clearly, we know you go through the goal scorers for the league in the last 3 or 4 years, the same blokes that are always in that top 10. And it's almost like, other than Oscar being a real chance, we don't have anyone else knocking on the door
Yeah.
to be that top 10. And that's what we're going to need to finish top half.
Well, yeah, it'll be interesting to see when Ali gets fit. He's probably the other one, and potentially Tete as well. I think he's not back until the new year, though. But I think those are the two I would think of. I mean, Pelkas is showing it in bits and pieces, but those are probably the players I can think of that would really need to step up and start to contribute a lot more. And even Oscar's really gone a bit dry after that sort of purple patch he had towards the start of the season. So it will be interesting to see what Rosini is able to get out of the side over the coming weeks.
Yeah, and look, when you talk about, you talk about Sarr, as an example. I mean, it's not just the fact that he scores goals. It's what he does. He is a threat, either shooting on goal or providing. He's, put it this way, you'd be pretty happy if you had Sarr running around in our squad. And so I suppose that's still that element that I don't feel like we've had right for a few years now. And we all know that getting a top shelf striker is hard work, and you can't put all your eggs in one basket either, because if they get injured, then you've got this problem. But it's almost like we've pinned a lot on Oscar just being the great hope. And realistically, when you get weeks like this, where we've got to score multiple goals really to get past Watford, we're then relying on a Slater or someone else to chime in. That's where I think our downfall is. But having said that, mate, we haven't given Rafinha a full crack at it yet. He may play a formation that allows for more activity up front. So
yeah, we'll see. And look, it'll be really fascinating in the new year when we've got even Traore, who we haven't seen a single thing from, Salah, Ali, Tete, all of those guys back. It will be almost an entirely new 11. So I just hope that we get to see that fully fit squad and see what they're capable of, and we don't get more sort of unfortunate injuries, sort of knock on wood, that we can keep the squad fit and actually see what they're capable of, because I think there's a lot to be admired about the City squad. It's just that we haven't seen them on the park at the same time over the start of this season. So look, I think you're right. I think a draw is probably something to aim for against Watford, maybe a 1-1 draw or something like that. If we could sneak a 1-0 win, maybe get like a scrappy. I'm sort of thinking like Bournemouth last season when Longman scored like 85th minute or something like that. Might be our best bet. But look, it'll be good to have City back in action. I mean, the World Cup's great and enjoying watching it, but it'll be good to have City back.
Yeah, I think so too. I think a draw's, look, if we're being realistic, if we could pinch a draw, I think we'd be happy with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, thank you for joining me for this episode.
Thanks for having me, mate.
No worries. And thanks everyone for listening in. We'll be back this time next week to review, hopefully, a very happy 3 points against Watford. And until then, come on, City.